Hello everybody, this is Tom Bronak speaking. Today I'm going to try to give you a real quick overview of how the dashboard works for both infrastructure, systems development lifecycle, recovery management, and compliance. It's going to be basically how all of the dashboards interconnect and how you can get to the information you need rapidly. The dashboard structure looks like this. We have an executive dashboard, which is the top tier. And then you have sub-tiers for the infrastructure dashboard, system development lifecycle dashboard, the recovery dashboard, and the compliance dashboard. I am going to be concentrating mostly on the disaster recovery aspect of it. So you have an additional sub-tier that has for DR exercises booklets, which are used for application recovery certification. And then you have business location recovery plans that could be used for evacuation plans, relocation plans, and as such. Let's just start by going from the infrastructure side right through to the rest of them. So we'll open the internet. All right, the infrastructure dashboard looks like this. Infrastructure has many functions, but the functions we're going to concentrate today on are those that are associated with asset management, inventory management, and configuration management. Those have to do with acquisition of resources, redeployment of resources, determination of those resources, and what functions are performed by the infrastructure team, those technicians that actually move things and do things. When an application is acquired, the resource or an application is built, the resource is required. First, an engineer recommends the type of resource. The resource is then identified. It's ordered. It's delivered and installed. It's then placed into the global inventory for the whole company and into the configuration management inventory for that site. When somebody has to redeploy the piece of equipment, because an employee may have left the company or went to a new position where he was going to be supplied with new equipment. Well, in that case, the data on the computer would have to be erased to the company standard. Any unnecessary programs would have to be released and erased as well. And then the equipment would be moved to a new location. It would be installed at the new location, and all the inventories should be updated appropriately, both the global inventory and the site inventory. The global inventory really doesn't get updated for this particular device unless we add additional components to it, and then we would add that to it. A termination, in that case, we're going to let the equipment leave our premise, and there are a lot of rules and regulations associated with that. For example, if there's data on the computer that has medical records on it, you're in HIPAA violation. If it has financial information on it, you could be in trouble for a lot of different rules and regulations. But basically what we have to do is erase the data off that machine in accordance with the Department of Defense. Then we can donate or sell the equipment. Now, if we don't want to donate or sell it, we might be able to also use it for disaster recovery purposes. So if you're going to a business recovery site, or if you have an internal business recovery site, and you don't need to have the same power of a PC in that site as you would in your production site, then you might be able to house old PCs there so you can extend their life and save some money. Once you do donate, sell, or reuse the equipment, or just simply throw it out for surplus, you have to have an updated registration, because if you're throwing it out, it's better be in compliance with the EPA Superfund standards than that you've disposed of all the chemicals and components that could be dangerous to the environment. Now, the infrastructure team will pick up the equipment. They'll move it from one place to another. They'll perform all the erasures that we've talked about. They'll maintain the status of the equipment, and they'll respond to the requesters who've asked for a move. Just to give you a brief understanding of how this goes, with the projects that most people are doing. If you have a user site and they're spread all over the world, and you want to get them under your control into production data centers that are maybe the Americas, Europe, Asia, you can then take an inventory of all the user sites and calculate the size of your production environment based on that. If you have to recover these environments, you also can calculate the recovery size of a recovery data center based on the equipment and the resources associated with critical applications. In your recovery site, you have available resource pool. In other words, you'll stock the recovery site with all the equipment and facilities that you need. And as applications are going through the recovery certification process, the pool of resources will then be dedicated to that application or sets of applications. So this way you can manage your recovery site's equipment. The services provided by the infrastructure group are much greater. They have site preparation, raised floors, office seating, the onboarding and preparation for new hires or transfers. They do Wi-Fi and internet and intranet support and connections to the users. They set up the workstations and they maintain the workstations. They provide people with supplies and they provide people with general support to the needs. One of the things we found as we started going through this, because the dashboard is basically set up to be a quick access information and not a metrics tool. But as we found, and we were monitoring different work functions being performed, that we could calculate the number of items that they're working on, how many are active, how many are pending, the number of people involved, what their hourly cost is, the average hours per unit of work, and then we could calculate it out and find out exactly how much the total costs are today. The total costs are, what the active costs are, and what the pending costs are. And then what's the percentage of completion? I just never felt that these were going to come out, but they did. And we were able to even structure a chart so that management could quickly see anything. And if you make changes to this chart, well, I can't in this case because we're in display mode, but if you make changes here, those changes will be shown up in this chart. The other thing you have is forms, movement, and control. So when you have to create a work order, there's an interface that could be produced that would help you select the right form. That form would be pulled from the forms library, and you would have two things with that form. One is a help screen, which would tell you what the form is used for and how to fill it out. And then you'd have a data entry validation operation so that when you fill out the form and hit enter, it would go through the form and tell you you made any mistakes. You would continue to do this until the form is completed. Then the form would be sent to a router. The router would determine who is authorized to approve it, who you're going to assign it to, and then you could route it from its first assignment to its last assignment, tracking and logging it as it happens, and providing interactive communication between the person who's actually doing the work and the submitter of the work, because things could change or he may be interested in finding out what the current status is. You can have a history of changes, when it's completed, when it's accepted, and then you can have a chargeback system to charge the purchase order time associated with somebody doing this work with the work order that was submitted to begin with. And in a personnel matrix, you can then use this to select the person who is going to be doing work for either a project or some other substantial piece of work within the company. Now, these people would have to fill out a learning skills index, which would list their skills and what level they're at, either a beginner, an intermediate, or a senior level person. As work goes on, you have volumes of work that could be increasing as your company grows. So if the volume increases, you may need additional staff. If the skills for those people increase, you're going to have to be retraining them. And the pooling is always going to have to be upgraded. And if they do need training, it can be scheduled, or you can recruit people. And when training is done, it can sometimes be done by a vendor or through a university that you have a relationship with. And if it's done through a vendor, you'll get a certification. And if it's done through a university, you'll get accreditations. And all those certificates would go to the employee. So how we track that is we have an automated personnel system that's used for recruiting. We have an automated training system that's used to bring people up to speed. And it can be accessed through the internet or intranet. And you can keep it internal within your company. We start out with profiles for users, their passwords, their user IDs, application IDs, basically saying what applications they can get to, what their responsibilities are, and what restrictions you have on them. This is for access controls and security. Tracking library would say, here are the current pieces of work that are being done. Here's what was done in the past. Here's what's going to be scheduled for the future. You have a database management library for forms and a documentation library for flat files, which are standards, procedures, manuals, anything that's not a database. This whole system here is your library management system. When work is assigned, it's logged. Then it's assigned to an individual from the first individual to the last individual, and it's tracked. It's measured as to how much time is spent at each location, and then it's analyzed and reported on so that you can take a proactive approach to resolving any issues that you have with workflow. So now we've looked at the infrastructure side. Let's bounce back and now look at the system development lifecycle. Well, system development starts out with development. A new request is made and something is built. It goes through a testing phase, a quality assurance phase, and in a testing phase, I'll show a little more about that and use of VMware for both testing and for recovery testing. The quality assurance group gets all the supported data together to make sure it's all there that's required and it's in a proper, it's been properly filled out and completed. Production acceptance is responsible for setting up the production environment prior to an application going into production. They need all the documents that are supplied through quality assurance, and you have to make sure the documents can help them place resources within files based on naming conventions. They would also have to do setup for the production environment, and they'd have to review the runbooks to make sure they're acceptable. Production comes into play when the application has passed all of the production acceptance requirements, and then you have a support function that will support the production operations. So if a problem occurred, they would look at the problem and resolve it. They'd go for root cause analysis of the problem. Sometimes a problem does require a fix that requires a change. So change management gets involved. When change management gets involved, you're going to take the version and release and up it by 1. For example, if you've already developed the environment, then it's version 1.0. Now you would make it 1.1, which means that the maintenance would take whatever you have in the development, bring it over to maintenance, up at 1.1, and then do the work against that. How the change is brought into place, it goes through version release management, then it goes to a change review board. If it's not accepted, it will be rejected. They'll have to make updates, and this loop will occur until it passes the change review board. And then we'll say problem repair, enhancement, or an update to the application, and maintenance will be done. Testing will be done. Quality assurance, production acceptance, and support. So this is an ongoing loop of activity, whereas this is a one-time event. The system development life cycle looks like this in the real world. And what happens is development, the user submits his work order request, and it says, here's the business purpose, here's the data that's involved with this, here are the people who own the data, here's how sensitive the data is and how critical it is. Sensitivity has to go with access controls. Criticality has to do with vital records management. Usage and sensitivity and criticality all combine to who's allowed to use it, under what restrictions, and what backup and recovery cycles are required. That's basically because I have to I have to be able to supply services for this application to its clients with within time restraints that are stated in the service level agreement or service contract. Unit testing and system testing is done, but now if you're in a VM environment, you can take a copy of the production environment as a snapshot and dump it into the VM test environment. So when you test this new or maintained application against the production environment, you can have a better idea if it's going to work or not. You can also do recovery testing, so you can tell that the application to be able to be recovered properly. The documentation for the testing and for the recovery should be added to the documentation given the quality assurance. When that quality assurance people get it, then that's added to production acceptance and everybody's happier. In a production environment, they do backups. In the old world, they used to back up tapes every day and then combine them on a weekly basis and put them in an offsite vault. Today, they have online or incremental backups of files. And in the VM world, they have a recovery point application that synchronizes data between a production environment and a recovery environment. Those are explained over here. Now, the end user, when he submits an application, he's also saying that this application has a certain amount of criticality to it, and it's run from this location. If I lose this location because of a fire or a natural disaster, I have to go to a business recovery facility, just like if I lost my IT environment, I'd go to a disaster recovery facility. So the fallover from a production environment to a business recovery environment can be accomplished by transferring the people to that location where they would have seats and computer equipment as they have at the original location. Once there, they can connect to the production environment just like that. In this case, they can connect to the production environment or they can connect to the disaster recovery environment, depending on what the circumstance may be. Documentation flows via a service request through the organization as such. And we have checkpoints that are brought into this flow. The first one is, since we're providing you with a service request and we do a technical and business analysis of it, our first decision is to whether we should build the application or buy an existing application that can provide that service. As we go through, we get to a checkpoint 2. Go through the applications group. If it's successful, we create turnover package, we schedule it, and then we have a review board, and they would have a go, no-go decision as to whether or not they're going to perform the work request right now and check it afterwards in a postmortem, which would say if it succeeded or failed. If it failed, it goes back to the submitter, and they go back to that route. If it succeeds, then the user performs acceptance testing, and they create a turnover package, and they would submit that to turnover for the production environment. Workflow is done in the following manner at each of those steps. Now, also forms are filled out throughout the whole systems development lifecycle, in both the development and maintenance world and testing and quality assurance and production acceptance. These forms or documents can be accessed through a link to a menu, and the menu can then provide you with the forms so you can see any form at any time. How this works is that when you finish or complete a cycle, you put the date here. When the date's not filled anymore, you know that's an active cycle. You can come over here to the menu. The menu would have these elements associated with it, and they'd have a status. If it's green, it's completed. If it's yellow, it's in process. If it's red, it's not being done yet. So you can step down to the yellow and see what's happening at this time. A chargeback system would take the work order that was used when they made the request and add purchase orders to it as the request cycled through the environment, and that would be totaled up. Now, this is important because a lot of projects are similar, and if you're going to do a project that was similar to a project performed earlier, this is a good way of understanding what has to be done and what the cost will be. Okay, that's enough for a system development lifecycle. Let's go back and look at recovery management. Now, recovery management as DR planning, application recovery, and certification. This is actually IT recovery. And business location recovery, which is a business recovery where you would go to a business recovery site. On the recovery side for applications, we also have an actual recovery management dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. And we have an application recovery certification process, which basically says if an application is ready for testing, and if it fails, it's either got a gap, an exception, or an obstacle, then they would have to be repaired and then rescheduled for testing. If it's successful, it could be certified as a high availability application where we have a failover, failback situation, or it could be a continuously available application, or sometimes called the gold standard, where you would have an active environment where both the production environment and the recovery environment are working at the same time. And you can simply flip from one environment to another without loss of work. At any time, you have to also attest to the certifications that are received, both for the business and for the IT. So you'd have operations recovery managers at each of the business locations and a technical manager who would review these operational recovery plans as well as the IT recovery plan, and then make a presentation to executive management with all the reports that are necessary. And at the end, they can attest to the successful adherence to compliance issues on an annual basis. Okay. Now, that's the recovery to that point. I want to show you some more about recovery, though. From this dashboard, I may want to get to the actual sub-dashboard for recovery planning. Now, this dashboard starts out with statements of work, so you know why you're doing it. Training materials, so you know how to do it. Presentations, which might help you understand better how the organization works. DR exercise booklets. Which would be more or less a fill-in-the-blanks type of book, where you'd have the cover, and you can see fill-in-the-blanks here, table of contents, and then throughout the book you'd see yellows that you have to fill in. An application description, exercise overview, scope, what signifies a success, what signifies a failure, stuff like that. Also, if you go to the appendices in this book, I hit it right. All right, you'll get a list of forms that have to be filled out. The pre-staging form here is used to help you set up the recovery environment. Remember I said there's a pool of resources, and we have to take that pool and make them available for an application that's going through testing. In this case, here's the application. Here's all the contact information. Then as you go down, here's the pretest, which is the names of the application servers, what applications are on them, what the production IP address is, and generally all the information that's required to set up the application in a recovery environment. And then you have the pretest, which is, well, let's put it like this. This is the infrastructure readiness area here. And what we're doing is we're taking a copy of the backup tape, latest backup tape, restoring it at the recovery data center, and then we're going to synchronize the two together. This way the data will be in sync at the recovery site with the production site. Now the pretest comes about when you are actually getting ready. You schedule your application for recovery application certification. So when this is done, the recovery team at the recovery site actually sets up the environment to be prepared to test your application. Okay, now we go on to the DR phases, and basically we've broken it into 6 phases. The readiness section, which is going to be used to set up the recovery environment, taking from the pool of resources and dedicating them to the application that's going to go through testing. There's a DR planning session where everybody gets together and plans on what application is going to be tested, what's going to be tested, what signifies success, what signifies failure, on and on. Then we'd have a pre-test, which sets up the environment to accept that application. Then we have the actual application test. Now, in that case, you're simply running the application based on your current job or application runbook. You're not doing anything different because even though you're in a recovery site instead of a production site, they look the same. The DR post test is basically set up to gather all the information that was obtained during the actual test, such as we had estimated these steps were going to take so-and-so amount of time. In actuality, they took a different time. So the delta or the change between the estimated time and the actual time will be recorded. As we ran the test, we also encountered some problems. All those problems would be listed as well. And we have comments made by the individuals conducting the test, and they will be accumulated as well. After that, a post-mortem test or meeting is conducted where the post-test activity would be used to generate an executive management summary and presentation for that meeting. During that meeting, all the events of the recovery event will have been reviewed and recommendations for improvement made. And those recommendations for improvement that are selected will be added to the recovery plan, and by exercising a recovery plan, reviewing it, improving upon it, exercising it again, you will eventually achieve the highest level recovery that you possibly can. Okay. Now you want to go back to look at the exercise runbook, which we just did. Now I want to look at what would happen if we were going to do a business recovery. First, I have an exercise booklet, a printed history of what happens with the exercise plan. So you can actually see, you can write it, you go through it and see what it's all about. Okay. You also could have an evacuation plan. Let's see what this is. Okay. This is the actual business continuity plan. Before I showed you the write-up on the exercise booklet, and this is for the business continuity. It's table of contents and stuff. Okay. It's another fill in the blanks where you put your logo here, you put your plan ID, letters, revision dates, and you can fill it out as you'll learn. There's some things here I wanted to tell you about, though, because they're going to be important in a second. When you have a site evacuation, you usually go to an assembly point, and that's been a standard for many, many years. When you evacuated the building and went to the assembly point, a head count was taken, and you would await further orders from management as to what you do next. But today, with the terrorist activities that are going on, it's been noted to me by a friend of mine named Felix Nader that this is not normally a good thing to do, because if it was a smart terrorist, what they could do is actually, if they knew your assembly point, they can plant explosives around here in hidden locations, perform a disaster event at your location just to get you out of the building. And when you went over here and assembled, boom, they blow you up. So the damage would be not that they're trying to hurt your recovery facility, your production facility, they're trying to kill your staff. So what we're trying to say now is that instead of going to an assembly point, maybe you should have some sort of call-in procedure so that people, especially everybody today has mobile phones anyhow, so they could run out of the building, disperse, so there's no one place they could go to, and that would eliminate that terrorist plot. And then they could call in with their head count. Of course, if there are people that are missing, you still have to find them. Another thing that I wanted to point out in this plan is that if you have to go to a recovery facility One thing that's nice is you always like to be able to tell the people where to go and how to get there. So the relocation information would be, you're at point A, here's the point B for the business recovery site, that's where you have to go to. Now, these instructions can be brought down by Google like they are here, or by MapQuest or whatever. But today, with everybody having GPSs in their car, you may just need to tell them what the address is for this location, and then they can get to that location from any direction that they want to, whatever is most convenient to them, rather than coming back to a starting point and working it like that. All right, now, an evacuation plan. What happens if you have to leave the building? Well, let's look at an evacuation plan and see what happens. The management dashboard is here. The site contacts are here. So if I have to get to executive management, the steering committee, the EOC, the command centers or recovery team members, or vendors, or the business recovery site, or disaster recovery site people, I can do that to supply chain people, because you have to tell them, don't deliver supplies to the primary site, we'll move it to a secondary site. So all that information would be here. And all these would be simple. You click on it, get a list of all the people, and you'll get their cell phone numbers, their email addresses, and everything else. Again, these are all drill downs, so you can see how easy they are to use. The DR team members would be here for this particular DR test. The location recovery plan is the business recovery plan that I told you about. And let's just step through what's happening. A disaster event occurs. Well, what is a disaster event? A fire was recognized in the break room. The microwave oven is on fire. All right. The disaster is declared. People report to the disaster declaration is reported to the contingent command center, and designated people have been authorized and there are people who are authorized to make a disaster declaration. The recovery team leaders for this location are notified. They notify their team members, and a recovery plan is initiated. And then the first thing is primary site has to be evacuated because there's smoke and damage. So the fire marshals get involved and try to escort everybody out. And as they go, they're going to go to an assembly point for head count and further instructions. Well, they perform the head count, and lo and behold, it's found that 2 people were missing. Well, first of all, the person who's doing the head count is that person. So you can see, if you drill down and look at this, you can find out who's doing the work. You can see his name, the company, he's a contractor, his phone number, his email, and even his instant message. If you have things like linking in your company and use that, all the people are in link, so you can click on anybody's name and you'll be able to get that information. But now that we have a problem, an action item has to be generated. So we generate the action item. And that action item steps through everything that's going on. 2 people were missing. The command center people are notified. We obtain instructions. We talk to the first responders. The police department says, nope, didn't see anybody. The emergency medical technician said, no, haven't taken anybody to the hospital or treated anybody. The fire department says, well, you know, it's pretty smoky in there. We may not have done the search we want to do. Now that we know there's people missing, we'll go in and take a secondary search, and they get into specialized equipment and stuff like that, and they swing into action. We notify the contingent command center that the first responders are going back into the building. Finally, some good news comes back that the fire department found the 2 missing people. They were both unconscious and suffering from smoke inhalation, but they were alive. The emergency medical technicians work on them, revive them, and they rush them off to the hospital. Management notifies the families of the missing people, and they rush to the hospital to be with their loved ones. Well, word comes back from the hospital that the 2 recovered people will make a full recovery and will be released within a day or 2. And everybody is euphoric about that, and they continue the recovery process as they were before. So in this particular case, management looks pretty good because they took the initiative to go look for the people. They found them. If they didn't take the initiative, who knows what would have happened to those people? They could have died. So, and the eyes of the surrounding community and everybody, the reputation of the company is going to be held in high esteem. Well, the ELC provide instructions for evacuated people, which is basically people are instructed to go home or to a secondary location for questioning or to continue work. Instructions are provided to personnel who were accounted for. Primary site is protected by security because you have critical resources in there. You have intellectual property, you have resources, and so on like that. So initially, the police department is going to be protecting the building, but when the disaster event is over, you want to have your own security force there to guard against anybody looting the place or taking anything that you want. You also want to notify a salvage and restoration vendor to come in and salvage the location, clean it up, and make it livable again, and restoration people to actually restore the equipment so that they can actually get up and going again. And again, you can get to those people by clicking on this list here. Business recovery site is notified that you declared a disaster and that you're going to need their business recovery site. But lo and behold, they turn around and say to you, I'm sorry, the business recovery site is full. Other people have also declared a disaster, and since they're here and we're full, our first come, first serve policy is in effect. Uh-oh, yeah, that's a problem. What do we do now? Supply chain vendor is notified of the event and instructed to modify delivery schedule and the location. In this case, he's just told, hold up, I don't know where you're going to go yet. The recovery team manager maintains status of the recovery actions, and the site personnel instructed to move operations to a designated recovery site. But there's no designated recovery site yet because we haven't found it. We have to actually make arrangements for a secondary site through a reciprocal agreement or through some sort of buy it, or rent a company site, something like that. So the company business is being conducted from a recovery site. Site personnel are instructed to move. Well, recovery team managers have turned around and said that, well, we can get a recovery site. It's rented. It's barren. We have to stock it with equipment, so they have to get the equipment to the recovery site. Then they have to instruct the people to the recovery site, and they continue to pick up work there. But the workload is going to be reduced, so management has to tell the clients that the workload is reduced and they won't be able to get the same service they have. That's going to affect their service level agreements or service contracts, and it may even violate regulatory requirements. And that's going to cause some concern because people will start making lawsuits against the government, against the company. Well, finally, the original site is ready for return because the salvage and restoration people have done that work. Management goes over, does an investigation. They declare that the site is ready to return to. But unfortunately, the site is not the site they had planned to return. The working site, the secondary site, is not the plan that they had developed, a site that they had a plan for to return to the primary site. So they have to develop another plan to return. That gets done, and eventually all the people get back to their primary site. The disaster event is over. Vendors are notified that everything should be resumed back to normal, and people pick up from there. There's problems, though, as you can tell. All right, last one, compliance dashboard. Now, the compliance dashboard is there to make sure that you are able to adhere to all of the regulatory requirements that you have to adhere to, laws and regulations worldwide. You have to define your audit universe so that you know what has to be audited. You have to eliminate any gaps or exceptions or obstacles that may impede your ability to adhere to regulatory requirements. And you have to produce a letter of attestation every year that would say, my company is in compliance. So there's an audit history, when the last audit was done, when the next one is going to be done. There's gaps and exceptions. There's obstacles that have to be mitigated and mediated so that you're okay. A list of some of the laws would be here. Strategies for eliminating the audit exceptions are there. An example of a compliance report for Sarbanes-Oxley is there. The mechanism of tracking compliance throughout the business locations and the entire company is announced. And a sequence of events from start to end for doing a risk assessment and complying to all the standards on an ongoing basis. All right, so now you've seen pretty much all of the recovery sites. And now the question is, why is the recovery dashboard so important? Well, as you saw, we have quick access to all of the current and accurate information. It can be accessed from anywhere and at any time. It allows for drill down to the person performing the current task, as you saw. You can connect to that person to get updates or to provide assistance. It supports conference calls, and remote meetings, so everybody can share the same document. It reduces confusion and chaos, and it's the most efficient way I've seen of conducting projects or on-time, real-time work efforts. It's better able to complete projects on time and within budget. Okay. Now, if you have any questions that you want to have answered, please forward them to me at bronacT@dch.com, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have. My next step would be, if you believe this approach can help your company improve performance and bring products and services to market more rapidly, then contact me at this. I would love to assist you in integrating this approach within your environment. Now remember, this approach uses your existing data, so you do not have to change information to adopt this product. This product just makes it easier for you to get to the information, and it maintains it in a current and accurate manner. I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you need my help in any way, don't hesitate to call. Thank you. Bye now. Oh.